Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. This is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. We chat with a local group which is doing its part to not only raise awareness, but to also help the most vulnerable. Around 500 people came out to support a jail pastor in Edmonton over the weekend. We have the details. And we hear from an Alberta doctor who says the government's lockdown measures are causing more harm than good.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Now, according to Stats Canada, in 2018, 97% of victims were female, and 73% of those were under the age of 24. Human trafficking has become a serious problem across North America for a number of years. As Micah Quinn explains, there is one organization in Lethbridge which is trying to do its part to not only raise awareness, but to help out the community with special bags.
Not for Sale and My City Care have partnered up to distribute Hope Totes to our city's most vulnerable, and the group was out today at Galt Gardens giving out these bags.
So in our women's hygiene care bags, we include mini shampoos, mini conditioners, we have soap in them, women's hygiene products, as well as facial wipes, and sometimes we're able to place some face masks and that type of thing. So any self-care items we try to fill them with. We also have toothpaste and toothbrushes, dental floss as well, just because we think that hygiene is an important part of self-care as well. So sometimes we pack our bags with some smaller sized lunches as well, with a bottle of water.
Today is also Human Trafficking Awareness Day, which is a huge part of what Not for Sale tries to advocate for on a daily basis.
Because human trafficking is such a hidden issue, it's so important that we take days like today and really, I think, recognize that even though we're not seeing it necessarily, especially in Canada, that it is happening in our backyard. It's happening to our neighbors, it's happening in our schools, it's happening everywhere in our community. And the more that we attune our eyes to be able to see it, the more that we're just going to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms, and it's going to give us that much more empowerment to be able to intervene on behalf of those victims when we have a chance to do so.
McNeese says that one of the main problems with human trafficking is that an individual can be sold over and over again.
And it's a massive profit for them. And I think that's the most devastating part is, taking human life for granted.
For more information or to donate to Not for Sale, you can visit their website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A huge rally was held at the Edmonton Legislature over the weekend by supporters of Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church. Coates was charged with breaking Alberta's Public Health Act by hosting full services and refusing to agree to the conditions of his release. Around 500 people attended the rally in support of Pastor Coates.
If in the communist country of Cuba, churches are open and we are jailing our pastors, what is happening to us? God help us. God shake our nation. God wake us up. God shake Christianity. Help us, Lord. Help us, Lord, not to be lukewarm anymore. Now is the time to be burning hot for God. Lord, help us. Lord, help us to be what God is calling us to be.
The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is fighting for the release of Pastor Coates and has called on Alberta Premier Jason Kenney to do so. Grace Life Church held another full service on Sunday, and the sermon chastised other churches for bowing to COVID-19 public health restrictions. Police are investigating. Alberta health officials said there were 273 new cases of COVID-19 identified in our province over the past 24 hours. There are currently 324 people in hospital with the virus, along with 53 in intensive care. As for active cases in Alberta, that number currently stands at 4,675. There were also 16 additional COVID-19 related deaths reported. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says there are more variant cases making their way to our province, but it's really difficult to pinpoint where they're coming from.
When we look at the data over the past couple of weeks, what we see is that our school-aged cases have mostly continued to drop. Again, a little bit of a plateau in the last couple of days, but where we've seen the biggest increase in our cases has been in older Albertans, those over the age of 30. So I think there are several factors. We have some outbreaks going on right now in different settings. We also know that of those Albertans over the age of 30, then when we look at all of the places where they've acquired disease, there are about a third of them where at this point they were not able to pinpoint exactly where that disease was acquired.
Hinshaw also added that fortunately close to 125,000 Albertans have also recovered from the novel coronavirus. Many in our city put on their walking boots for a great cause on February 20th. The coldest night of the year raised close to $65,000 for charities in Lethbridge. This money will go toward helping the homeless and addressing hunger issues here in southwestern Alberta.
Well, this year when we set our goal, we had initially set it at half of what we had earned last year at the Coldest Night event. So we had initially had a goal of $24,000. And we, just in the last couple weeks, we surpassed that goal. So we did raise the goal in hopes that we would earn $40,000. And within days, or actually within probably a day of moving that goal up, we had surpassed that. Our community came together and we are, yes, at about $65,000 now, and the money is still coming in.
Now you can still donate to the coldest night of the year until February the 28th, as virtual walkers can still take part until that time. Junior hockey clubs in Alberta are struggling financially during the pandemic. With no way of bringing in fans, the province has launched a virtual 50-50 draw to help. 20 WHL clubs will have the opportunity to offset lost revenues. And as Ainsley O'Reilly explains now, our local Lethbridge Hurricanes are a part of that group.
Of the 5 Alberta teams in the Central Division, Lethbridge is the only community-owned, which during the pandemic has presented its challenges.
As you can tell, my palms are sweaty every day for the last little while, trying to figure out ways that we're going to try to overcome this year's financial losses.
The province announced Monday that the 50-50 draws will run each weekend in March and will also support the Alberta Junior Hockey League.
This is a vital step that will help to see junior hockey keep going on in Alberta.
Clubs will be required to share a portion of the funds with local charities. Back in January, the Saskatchewan government dished out $1 million for the SJHL. And although the lottery won't guarantee the Canes a specific dollar amount, the team is optimistic.
Every dollar that gets spent on those 50-50 tickets gets us a little closer to that break even. I'm not by any means saying that we're going to get close to a break even, but there's wishful thinking, I guess you could say.
In-stadium 50-50 draws of the past have been quite popular for the Hurricanes, and they're hoping to generate that same success.
The early buy-in, hopefully that people jump on board and realize by buying this 50-50 what it's doing to all the communities in Alberta. And if they get on board with it, hopefully we can see the growth that some of the NHL teams have seen grow, but that'll remain to be seen.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
1 year ago today, hundreds of people gathered at the NMAG Centre for the International Peace Powwow. This year will look drastically different. The event has been moved to Facebook and will go on for 6 straight weekends. Indigenous drummers, musicians, and singers have missed in-person gathering, but are doing their best to continue celebrating Treaty 7 culture.
Gosh, it's just, COVID-19 has been horrible to the powwow people, the dancers, the drummers. The last event that they went to was our 2020 powwow. Getting up there and seeing their friends, having the opportunity to dance with all the crowds. It's a loss. It's a big loss.
Powwows have been tentatively scheduled for in-person performance at the NMAG Centre for the months of April and May. Alberta's finance minister says this Thursday's budget will focus on COVID-19 pandemic aid, along with getting the economy back on its feet. But Travis Taves says deficits will continue. Last year's projected deficit was $6.8 billion, but it has since tripled to $21 billion. Taves says the government's #1 priority is making sure there's health funding to deal with the pandemic. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is going to court to fight for Canadian resource development. To talk more about this in detail is the Alberta Director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, joining me from Calgary. Franco, so you're fighting against the federal government's Bill C-69, otherwise known as the No More Pipelines Law?
We need businesses to be able to develop resources here in Canada because it helps us create jobs, it helps us get our neighbors back to work, but it's also very important for taxpayers because the oil and gas industry, pipelines, generates a ton of government revenue, and if politicians aren't getting that revenue from pipelines or oil and gas, they're going to start looking to families to pick up the tab. And we've calculated that the pipeline deficit in Canada is costing us billions of dollars. And that's a ton of money that could be used to be building hospitals or to be lowering taxes and providing families with much needed relief.
Premier Jason Kenney has been fighting against Bill C-69 for quite some time now and hasn't had much success. What makes you think that this time will be any different?
I think we have to give Premier Jason Kenney some kudos on this for giving taxpayers the opportunity to go to court to fight Trudeau's and Ottawa's No More Pipelines law. And we just have to look back to what happened in the Alberta Court of Appeal with the carbon tax, where we were successful. So, we are giving the Premier some kudos on this one.
So, Franco, how damaging has Bill C-69 been to our oil and gas industry here in Alberta?
It's really been another blow, right? It's really made the tough times tougher in Alberta. And I think one of the key issues we have to remember is we just saw President Biden pull the plug on Keystone XL. And you know what that tells us? It tells us just how important it is to actually be able to build pipelines in Canada, right? We have to have our politicians stop throwing roadblocks that make it harder for job creators to build pipelines, because every time that politicians make it harder for us to actually develop our resources, we're dragging taxpayers further into debt.
That was Franco Terrazzano, Alberta Director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining me from Calgary. Many legal firearms owners are not happy with Ottawa proposing legislation which would allow municipalities to implement bylaws banning guns. You can include Rick Blakely in that group. Mr. Blakely is with the Alberta Fish and Game Association here in Lethbridge. He says the changes to those laws will have no impact on violent gun crime, and if anything, will make legal firearm owners the scapegoats.
The guns that aren't stored properly are the guns in the belt of the violent person who is using a firearm for violent intent. They haven't followed the rules, and the government will never, ever, until they start prosecuting them, get them to comply with the rules. We're the scapegoats.
Mr. Blakely will also discuss why he believes the Liberals reducing minimum sentencing for firearms offences is a big mistake. That is coming up after business news. 2 vaccine developers in Canada are blaming the lack of federal funding for thwarting the development of homegrown COVID-19 vaccines. Dr. Kerry Gobinger, a microbiologist from Laval University, was part of the Canadian teams that helped develop vaccines for Ebola and Zika. He says his nonprofit had a shot with excellent early lab results last February, but it stalled because it could not find funding. John Lewis, the CEO of Entos Pharmaceuticals in Alberta, says his company is one of 6 that received around $5 million to move their COVID-19 vaccine along. Ontario's COVID-19 vaccine rollout could look a little bit different in each of its 34 public health units as the province receives more doses in the coming weeks. Ontario Solicitor General Sylvia Jones says each health unit has drawn up a unique plan to distribute the vaccine, and all have been submitted to the government for approval.
We are ensuring through our vaccine distribution that the people most closely to their communities, the public health units, are making the decisions on what is the fastest and easiest and most equitable way to ensure that people get the vaccines they need. It's why we've empowered 34 public health units to do that, and we've ensured by doing a distribution based on population that as a larger public health unit comes online and needs the vaccines, we distribute it from the province based on population. So that distribution will happen very equitably, and we are confident that those 34 public health units are reacting and responding to the needs in their local communities.
RCMP say autopsies are scheduled in Calgary this week for 3 people who were found dead of suspected drug overdoses in Drumheller over the weekend. Police say 2 women, aged 21 and 27 from Drumheller, along with a 31-year-old man from Rosedale, were found dead when officers responded to a 911 call on Saturday night. Mounties have issued a public warning that the deaths may be linked to drugs possibly laced with fentanyl, carfentanil, or methamphetamine. RCMP are also investigating a death on the Piikani Nation. Police say it is a suspected drug overdose. RCMP received a 911 call on Sunday about an 18-year-old female in medical distress. When they arrived, she was found in cardiac arrest. Life-saving efforts were administered, but the young woman was pronounced dead at the scene. The early investigation indicates that the death may have been related to a drug overdose, but the investigation is ongoing. An autopsy has been ordered for later this week in Calgary. A group representing Métis and non-status Indigenous people say the guilty verdict in an Edmonton trial is welcome news. A jury found Bradley Barton guilty of manslaughter in the death of Cindy Gladue, an Indigenous woman whose body was found in an Edmonton hotel bathtub in 2011. National Vice Chief for the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, Kim Bowden, says while the verdict is positive, the killing was despicable and justice was too long delayed. A jury in 2015 found Barton originally not guilty of first-degree murder in Gladue's death, but both the Alberta Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada ordered a new trial. A group of Winnipeg organizations is working to build housing for Indigenous homeless people in the city's downtown core out of shipping containers. The Village Project is a 22-unit communal housing development. It has already received $2.7 million in federal funding. End Homelessness Winnipeg says the project is being expedited since COVID-19 and the extreme cold are making the city's homeless even more vulnerable. An explosion at a homeless camp in the city last week left one person dead. Here's some incredible footage of migrants trying to cross from North Africa into Europe. Many were found hiding inside of a container of recycled glass and a bag of ash. The European Union says migrant smuggling is huge business for criminal networks with an estimated annual turnover reaching billions of euros. Smugglers use land, sea, and air routes to facilitate illegal migration both into and within the EU, furthering their illegal business practices. Lots of wind for many regions of our province once again. Fortunately, the wind warning for our area has ended and the seasonal values will continue. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. The milder temperatures continued for much of southwestern Alberta today thanks to those Chinook winds. And fortunately, the wind warning has ended, died down just a little bit. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the wind is dying down, but the mild temperatures should remain.
Yeah, that's right. Those plus temperatures should remain at least until the weekend when it starts to get back into the minuses as we see some periods of snow then as well. Speaking of snow, we could see a chance of flurries into this evening and also into tomorrow, Tuesday. So 60% chance of flurries. And then here's a different one for this time of year. Risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow afternoon, actually. High of 2 degrees. We could experience some wind as well, up to 50 kilometers per hour. Into Wednesday, lots of sunshine. 0 is our high. 3 for Thursday with a mix of sun and cloud. 4 degrees the high for Friday. And then into Saturday, actually those flurries are going to begin Friday night into throughout Saturday there. -5 is the high on a Saturday, and then a high of 9 degrees for Sunday. So look at that fluctuation in temperature. We're kind of going up and down again like a roller coaster, which is kind of expected this time of year, although mostly out of this range here. So the average highs 3 degrees, average lows for this time of year -10. 17 was our high temperature back in 1973, and in 1957 we had our chilliest day on record, which was -34. 7:28 is when the sun rose this morning, sunset this evening, right into that 6 o'clock hour at 6:02 p.m. So nice to see that sun setting later and later. Showers expected on the west coast. Victoria's high 8 degrees. Going to be experiencing quite a bit of wind. They're up to 80-kilometer gusts in the Juan de Fuca Strait. 7 degrees the high in Vancouver. Periods of snow experiencing expected this evening, actually, in both Edmonton and Calgary. Tomorrow, Edmonton remaining in those pluses with a high of 3 degrees, -1 the expected high for Calgary. As I was saying, those flurries beginning tonight and remaining through tomorrow. -1 the expected high in Saskatoon, 0 in Regina. Periods of snow there beginning in the morning. -2 the expected high for Winnipeg. Not bad. Even their wind chill is only as chilly as -10. So warming up there as well. Toronto, a mix of rain and snow, high of 5 degrees. Snow expected in Ottawa tomorrow, 2 degrees the high, 1 expected in Montreal, chance of flurries there as well. As we look further east into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton experiencing some snow flurries tomorrow, 4 degrees the high. Halifax, a little bit of both, rain and snow tomorrow, 7 is the high. Charlottetown, rain and snow. They could actually get up to 10 centimeters of snow tomorrow, and 2 centimeters expected in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow with a high of 1 degree. There you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Supplements King in Red Deer and Lethbridge, Canada's workout and nutrition products retailer.
2 of the biggest remaining American-owned and based tire manufacturers are joining forces. Goodyear Tires acquiring Cooper Tires in a deal worth around $2.8 billion. It will combine the two century-old Ohio companies. Cooper shareholders will get $41.75 in cash and about 0.9% shares of Goodyear common stock per share of Cooper stock. Based on Goodyear's closing price on Friday, the offer is a 24% premium to Cooper's closing price at the end of last week. TC Energy is holding firm on its offer to buy out other unit holders of TC Pipelines. This is despite opposition from a dissident unit holder that says it's simply inadequate. Connecticut-based Energy Income Partners says it would vote against TC Energy's offer for the rest of the U.S. Master Limited Partnership it operates. But TC Energy says its proposed share exchange ratio represents a 20.8% premium to the partnership's closing price before its original offer in October. It says it will not sweeten the pot, and the partnership will remain a publicly traded limited partnership if the merger is not completed. French drug maker Sanofi is going to produce up to 12 million doses per month of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine. The deal is the second time the French drug maker is turning over production facilities to speed up supplies of a rival company's vaccine while its own vaccine candidate faces delays. Sanofi says its vaccine manufacturing plant will formulate and fill vials of the single-dose vaccine for Johnson & Johnson. Chinese tech giant Huawei has unveiled a new foldable smartphone that will only be sold in China. The Mate X2 marks a fresh effort by the company to reinforce its status as a tech leader. It also highlights the company's challenges after the U.S. government cut off access to American processor chips and Google services. In 2020, Huawei fell from #1 among smartphone brands to 6th place. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 32 points on the day to finish at 18,417. The Dow was up 27 points to 31,522. The S&P 500 was down 30 points to 3876, and the Nasdaq was down 341 points on the day to 13,533. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 225 to 61.49 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to 2.95 US. Gold was up 7 cents to 18.0974 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 28.13 US an ounce. Wheat is at $308 per metric ton, barley's at $313, canola's at $7.47, and corn is at $344 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $115.73, feeder cattle were up 20 cents to $139.33, and lean hogs were up 63 cents to $85.13. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.28 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta's finance minister says this Thursday's budget will focus on COVID-19 pandemic aid along with getting the economy back on its feet. But Travis Taves says deficits will continue. Last year's projected deficit was $6.8 billion, but it has since tripled to $21 billion. The lockdowns have taken their toll on us spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and even financially. Coming up, Dr. Ari Jaffe from the University of Alberta chats with Jeanette Rocher about the collateral damage these lockdowns have had on many Canadians. That Q&A is on deck. The federal Liberals have tabled Bill C-21 with new legislation to amend our current gun laws. Gun control advocates say it doesn't go far enough and that the Prime Minister did not keep his promises. Now, on the other hand, gun owners say it unfairly targets them, including farmers, hunters, and sport shooters. Today's guest is Rick Blakely, president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association and the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. Rick, welcome to Bridge City News.
How do you do? Good to meet you.
Now, first of all, tell me a bit about the Lethbridge Shooting Sport Facility. What kind of people are part of the club and what age ranges? Is it for everyone?
Well, actually it is. We've got a very diverse membership. Over 2,000 women and men and children, of which the adults are members. The children, we provide the facility for free for children who are accompanied by their parents or a guardian. So it's a really diverse group. We don't refuse membership to anyone, and we have way too much fun.
Now, Rick, one concern I keep hearing is that very little of the new gun legislation focuses on criminal misuse of firearms. Instead, it really singles out the legal gun owners who've been vetted by the RCMP, including sport shooters, hunters, farmers, and ranchers. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're absolutely right. And earlier you said the people who are wanting controls over guns feel that they are disappointed in the Liberal government. Many of our members voted Liberal because they said that they would put in regulations that respected hunters, firearm owners, and farmers. So we feel that they've definitely went against our what we thought they were all about. Um, this new law doesn't really change much. The current laws are very strict. As a matter of fact, we talk about hockey or football or something like that. If a person who owns a firearm is engaged in a hockey game and gets a little hot under the collar and fights, they can have right now they can have their firearm license taken away because they have shown violent behavior. It's no different than their new red and yellow and I forget what colors they are, but the flags, they're using the terminology used in the United States, and it's already in place in Canada. Right now, I can get my firearms and my ability to own firearms taken away.
Now, Rick, as a gun owner yourself, are you tired of being the target of this kind of legislation? Pardon the pun, by the way. And how much of this new gun legislation is actually new?
Well, like I said, it really is a reiteration of a lot of the things that are currently in the law. The only addition is there's a whole bunch of firearms that are on the new prohibited list, firearms that were purchased and registered and looked after in safes, in vaults, and taken to the range for shooting sports activities. So those guns represent about 900,000 guns that the government's currently talking about confiscating through a buyback program, which is basically a program of telling you what they'll pay you for a gun and you got to take it. So I think that's illegal right now.
If most of the gun crime is coming from gangs in the big cities, will this kind of legislation actually fix anything? Or is it maybe better to focus on stopping the illegal guns from crossing the border?
Absolutely. Illegal guns, it's really interesting how perceptions are. Most of the illegal guns come from across the border or are actually built by the criminals. And so these guns that we have are stored in vaults. They don't, very seldom are they ever involved in a crime. So violent people use firearms for violent intent. Of the murders since 1980, 116 murders were committed by violent people who had registered firearms, 116 people since 1980. That's over 40 years.
So Rick, why were certain rifles banned? Rifles like the AR-15 are labeled as assault weapons, which are only meant to be used on the battlefield by the military. But is that actually the case, or are they genuinely a sport shooting or hunting rifle?
They were designed by the shooting sports people who shot in sports where you had to be very nimble and very accurate. And so they designed a firearm that was ergonomically fitting them, and it was light and it was nimble and it was easy to use. The military took that design, didn't use the semi-automatic, which is a pull of the trigger, shoots a bullet. They made it into a fully automatic machine gun that looked and felt exactly like the sporting gun, because they needed a rifle that would be nimble in Vietnam, where it was jungle warfare.
Rick, the new legislation allows cities to ban handguns by means of restricting their storage and their transportation. Do you see this as really a good idea, or is there maybe potential concerns here?
It's good that you mention that, because firearms currently that we own and are in our vaults and safes are in a very safe position. It's illegal for us to store a firearm unlocked or out in the open. So they're all in vaults and safes anyway. Central storage won't change that. The guns that aren't stored properly are the guns in the belt of the violent person who is using a firearm for violent intent. They haven't followed the rules, and the government will never, ever, until they start prosecuting them, get them to comply with the rules. We're the scapegoats. The criminals, it's really interesting. The current government has made the minimum sentences for firearm use of a firearm in the commission of a crime. They've taken the minimum sentences out of those offenses and drug offenses. It really makes me wonder who is the priority here. It seems like they are looking after the criminal and definitely impacting the safety of every citizen.
Now, Rick, another issue is that municipalities are normally under provincial jurisdiction. So do the feds actually have the constitutional right to do this? I understand that the province might actually challenge this.
Well, you're absolutely right. The federal government is, in this case, stepping all over municipalities and provinces. And it is, from my understanding, provincial regulation to it's provincial regulations, and they didn't even consult with the provinces. So this is going to be another issue of poorly thought out firearm policies.
Now, the legislation has a voluntary buyback program for the banned guns, but gun owners don't have to sell their guns to the government as long as they don't shoot them or sell them and they keep them locked up. Now, this obviously has infuriated a lot of gun control advocates, and this does raise some interesting questions. If these weapons really are dangerous, why would you not follow through and make it mandatory with a buyback program?
Well, first I have to correct you in your term weapons. That's the propaganda from the government. They're calling them weapons, which are typically used for killing people. Our firearms are used for shooting targets, and there's a very clear distinction between the intent of the person using both of those tools. I don't see it as being a legitimate activity. If you were to tell me that I had to sell you my car for $100, I'm sure there would be a case for a charge. It's illegal for you to tell me what you're going to pay me for an object. And so the government is really going outside of personal property rights. What's next? Do they take all the gasoline cars and say, we're going to have a buyback program? They never owned the car, but they'll give you $1,000 for it.
And then we'll go back to horse and buggy. There you go.
Yeah, right.
It may not work in the wintertime quite as well, though. Now, Rick, are you hearing any feedback from local area gun store owners on this? Because if they already have some of these banned guns as part of their inventory, it would only seem fair that the government buy all of them back.
Well, it's really interesting. That's a really interesting part. The government's telling business owners to send them back. Interesting fact that this new bill, Bill 21, did add airsoft guns, BB guns, and paintball guns to the number of guns that are even toy guns to the prohibited firearms in the act, which is pretty ludicrous. And there's a number of companies that, there's thousands of jobs on the line as far as firearm stores. But in the past, they have shifted to hunting to other firearms that are not prohibited. It's going to cost millions. And Bill, let's just be real frank. It's going to be $1 billion problem, maybe even more.
Wow. Now, another concern is that Bill C-21s red flag and yellow flag legislation would apparently allow police to enter the home of a gun owner without a warrant after receiving a complaint. Can you explain how that works?
Well, there's another case where firearm owners are treated differently than criminals. Currently, it's illegal for me not to update my address and location. A while ago, the Conservative Party tried to put through a bill that would maintain the addresses of people who had been charged with violent crimes. That bill failed. The Liberals and the NDP didn't want that in. So right now, under the current legislation, they can enter my home, they can search it, check to make sure that my firearms are properly stored in a vault. They can talk to anyone they want as far as my mental capacity, and anyone can report me for as a firearm owner, a licensed firearm owner, a respectful, responsible firearm owner. They can report me if I do any violent act, even if I'm engaged in a hockey game or a football game or a soccer game. If I get upset and start hitting somebody, that's a violent act, and I can lose my guns and my privilege to own firearms.
So Rick, any final thoughts as to where this is going and how concerned Canadians and law-abiding gun owners should respond?
I don't know where they're going with this. I would expect that they're wanting to eliminate all firearms. They definitely are trying to follow the example of New Zealand. New Zealand's a small island. It's very isolated. It doesn't have a United States on its border. And so it's very easy for them to control firearms. However, I understand that illegal firearms are still a problem in New Zealand. So where is this going? I think there's a utopian belief that if there are no firearms, there will be no wars and there will be no violence. But really, firearms are, it's a wonderful sport. It's an Olympic sport. And I have taught children how to use firearms, and children, we offer programs for children who can't afford any other of the sports because we offer them for free. And I have had children who have problems for their parents. And once they start using firearms and start enjoying the sports, they understood what responsibility was. They understood that they were being responsible for a potential danger to others, and they have different opinions about violent video games now. So I think it's wonderful that the government of the past used to encourage children to take up the shooting sports. I think that was a very good activity to teach responsibility and respect for others.
Well,
and
I remember,
we try and maintain
my
that.
father had an acreage out by Bowden, Alberta, and I was a kid back in the 70s. And I started out on a pellet gun to a 22, and then he handed me a 12-gauge shotgun, showed me how to put the stock into my shoulder, says, "Go ahead, son, let it go." So I did some target shooting, and I landed 12 feet behind me on my butt right after that. So I'll never forget that.
Same experience, only my dad lined me up with a slew.
Thank you so much for your time today, Rick. Rick Blakely is the president of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.